The study session for Monday, December 13, 2021 is now called to order. An announcement for the call-in line.
Good evening. Thank you for joining tonight's Aurora City Council study session. If you're listening on the phone, please note public comments are not taken during study sessions. The phone line is in listen-only mode. City Council welcomes comments from residents at regular council meetings on both matters appearing on the agenda and during public invited to be heard. Phone line on those evenings opened for sign-up at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Kaufman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bergen?
Here.
Councilmember Coombs?
Present.
Councilmember Gardner?
Here.
Councilmember Drinsky?
Here.
Councilmember Lawson?
Here.
Councilmember Mercano?
Present.
Councilmember Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Murillo? Councilmember Murillo? Councilmember Sundberg?
Here.
And Councilmember Zvanek?
Here.
There's a quorum.
Thank you. Mayor's update. There will be a special study session of the Aurora City Council on Wednesday, December 15th. It will begin at 6:30 p.m. It will be a virtual meeting. The subject matter is youth violence prevention presentations. It will include Christina Amperin, Youth Violence Prevention Program Manager, Vanessa Wilson, Chief of Police, Katie Snell from Aurora Mental Health, Greg Cazell from Aurora Public Schools Director of Security, and Guadalupe Flores, APS student. The first hour will be presentations by the members of the panel that I just mentioned, and the second hour will be questions from members of the City Council and myself. It will be available on auroragov.org. There are no issue updates. Is there any objection to moving the consent calendar forward, item 2A through 2D? Seeing no objection, the consent calendar will move forward. Items 2A through 2D. Youth violence, item number 3A, Youth Violence Prevention Program Update. And let me turn that over to staff for a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Carice Canales, and I'm the Community Engagement Division Manager at the City. I oversee the Youth Violence Prevention Program team, and it is my pleasure to kick off our presentation tonight. As a reminder, this is a new program that launched in spring of this year. Our team presented to Council in July and to the Horns Policy Committee in October with updates on the program development. Now we're back for an end of the year recap that will focus on introducing the team, highlighting the immediate responses to the string of youth involved shootings last month, as well as looking at next steps to include winter break programming and community funding opportunities as we head into phase 2 of the program implementation. Now, Christina, if you could share the presentation and we can get started.
I can just be given the ability to share my screen, please.
Thank you. So you can go to the next slide. Great. As an organization, we've been talking about how we engage community to identify their most pressing needs so we can develop the best solutions and resources to meet those needs. We know that youth violence cannot be tackled in a silo, that it requires collaboration and integration across both our city organization and with our partnering agencies and community stakeholders. We need to align and support efforts to increase the impacts to those affected by youth violence. Now, phase one of the program development has really focused on laying the foundation with the community assessment, crafting policy and procedures, and bringing together key stakeholders and partners to build systems of coordination. Now is a good time to pause as we look towards phase two to build out the program even further and get your feedback again. Now with that, I'll hand it over to Cristina Abradan, who's the Youth Violence Prevention Program Manager.
Thank you, Carice. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cristina Amparan, and I've been with the City of Aurora now for 8 months and have over 20 years of experience working within the criminal justice, social services, and education fields, to include being part of the development of the Gang Reduction Initiative of Denver. I also wanted to introduce my team. Kayla Salmon is the program coordinator. She's a master's level social worker and oversees the Youth Advisory Council, a referral process, and the future multidisciplinary team that we'll be developing. She's also been instrumental in helping with the coordination of the program's work groups. Arturo Villa is a bilingual outreach specialist that has been part of the program since June. He comes to us with past experience as a probation officer and works directly with youth who are exhibiting at-risk behaviors and providing wraparound supports to them and their families, system navigation efforts, and referrals to resources that he's identified may benefit them. Both have been extremely instrumental in the progression of the program to date. Our team biographies are part of the backup documentation in case you are interested in learning more about our background. What you see here is the mission of the program. So we're really focusing on enhancing public safety to reduce the impact of youth violence in our communities in Aurora. We're doing this through implementing a comprehensive and proactive public health approach that's inclusive of youth, community partners, system-based organizations to address those high-risk behaviors that we've identified. Carice mentioned that we have taken actions, and some of these actions are outlined here, to implement a short-term response while we work to develop the implementation of other long-term efforts. The program's focus has been to support the enhancement of current activities, both internally and externally.
Hey, Christina, just before you keep going, could you speak up a little bit louder? The audio is coming in a bit quiet. Just want to make sure all the council can hear you.
Let me get my computer closer. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Perfect. So to date, we've partnered, and just to highlight a very few examples, we've partnered with faith-based communities to host safe havens after violent incidents that have occurred in our community, to offer residents a safe space and access to resources. Our Youth Advisory Council has completed over 275 hours of volunteer work and have led a youth-specific service job or service project in collaboration with Hinckley High School students, where over 140 families were provided turkeys, canned food, and resources the day after the shooting that occurred on school grounds. A youth forum was held at the beginning of December, where over 70 youth provided their perspective around the impacts of youth violence, and was facilitated by other youth and community organizations. And internally, our city departments have also taken a number of steps to support our program, to include convening and identifying areas of collaboration and opportunity. Members of the Aurora Police Department, ranging from representatives from specialized units to victim services to community relations, have been engaged in program activities consistently since the get-go. The Parks and Rec, so PROS department, have also taken a lot of actions to be able to support our efforts that include expanding their hours of operation during the school winter break to allow youth to have an opportunity to have access to pro-social activities and safe spaces. We were also able to provide daily recreation passes to youth over the summer and into the fall to remove the barrier that a lot of our youth have of not being able to pay for daily admissions. and over 100 youth were able to take advantage of using some of those daily rec passes. And lastly, our library is looking to bring back life skills classes that stopped due to COVID and look for other ways to engage youth in their spaces and continue to be a vital resource to our community. These are, again, only a few highlights of the work that we have taken in the short term in response to some of the challenges that our youth are facing. The Yvpp program has taken a public health approach that calls for community assessment that's inclusive of qualitative and quantitative data. The assessment that has been completed includes gathering the input of over 600 Aurora youth and adults, with the majority of them being adults, and the participation of over 60 individuals that were part of either individual interviews or focus groups that included parents, school representatives, mental health representatives, people from the criminal justice departments, faith-based leaders, and representatives from community-based organizations, just to name a few. What you see here on the slide are the top risk factors that have been identified as being challenges impacting youth in the city of Aurora. So keep in mind that this is not a full inclusive list of risk factors that youth may be facing, and that at any given point, youth may be facing more than one of these risk factors at any given time. What you also see here are some of the hotspots in our community. So the data shows that there's a concentration of risk factors and violent behavior occurring in very specific Aurora communities. When we overlap some of the maps of all these different risk factors happening in our community, we consistently found that the hotspots are within the same areas. And so for this reason, a multifaceted, multi-year approach is needed to address the complexity of what is leading to violent behavior in our city and ensure that we're implementing that multifaceted approach that's made up of both community-based responses, but also intervention and prevention efforts. Some of the preliminary data that our assessment did show is part of the backup documentation that you have in case you're interested in reviewing some of that information. The program has 4 work groups that have been actively working over the last several months to help develop the Aurora approach that you see on this slide. The groups include the Policy Steering Committee, the Intervention Work Group, the Youth Advisory Council, and the Community Mobilization Work Group. These groups make up a network of over 80 individuals from diverse backgrounds and expertise that have been working alongside myself and my team to be able to identify how our program can be the most effective and the most impactful. These groups have discussed the development of these 5 different strategic categories that includes the program infrastructure. So how do we develop that multi-year, multi-level, multi-sector response? How do we ensure that we are supporting organizational change in order for us to have that collective response, but also make changes when needed and look for areas of opportunity? And then we are looking to implement intervention, very specific intervention and reentry actions in order to serve those youth most at risk or exhibiting the higher risk behaviors that are actively part of some of the violent crimes that we're seeing in our community. And under the secondary prevention category, starting to identify and provide wraparound supports to those individuals starting to exhibit at-risk behaviors and ensure the family is being provided supports to prevent them from exhibiting high-risk behaviors in the future. The groups have also focused on primary prevention efforts that more so target the larger community. So looking at ways that the larger community can implement efforts to reduce the likelihood of some of those risk factors and increase some of those protective factors that we need to see. The following are the top 3 categories the Yvpp network has identified for each of the 5 strategic areas. Each of these strategies are outlined further in your backup documentation that was provided in case you do want to learn a little bit more of what each of these strategies calls for. To highlight a few, the recommended priorities are to hire the remainder of the program staff, increase our network's capacity to understand and respond to youth violence, develop a community and school critical incident response, and provide supports to those youth exhibiting risky behaviors through the work of our outreach specialists, and continue to implement the work of our Youth Advisory Council. The assessment also helped identify the following categories as efforts to help fund programming gaps that we have identified in our city. These efforts include duplicating local and national models that have proven to help reduce violent behaviors and that will help move some of the regional efforts forward. Okay. So what we'll do is we will release a notice of funding opportunity in January and have a review panel that will be identified and help review and score the proposals that we will receive. We will work with either the Horns, the Public Safety Committee, or the clerks and mayor pro tem to potentially include a council member on the review panel to ensure that we're inclusive of a larger perspective as we move forward with reviewing the proposals for the NOVO. We will select the proposals we will be moving forward in February and fund in March. The following are requirements applicants must meet to ensure we follow city requirements, but also to ensure that we have some flexibility with our agreements. We will look to find organizations that can provide the programming that will lead to some level of behavioral change, organizations that can have some metrics in place to gather performance measures, and whose work will be able to align with our program strategic plan. We want to ensure that whatever we're funding is in support of what we're aiming to implement. The following is a rating criteria that we will follow that includes the organizations, really looking at the organization's ability to serve a diverse community, their ability to provide the requested programming that we're looking for, and we will look to ensure that the organization provided a very clear outline of the service delivery, a timeline, metrics, and budget. We want to ensure that we're reviewing all the information as a whole as we decide who we'll be moving forward with. And here's a collage of pictures of our Yvpp network in action for you all to take a look at. We've been really busy and we have a huge amount of support from all of our stakeholders. And so I just wanted to take a moment to highlight everyone and their work in the community. The program initially focused on primary prevention efforts to lay the foundation we were developing to include the relationships with key stakeholders in our community. We did that through funding our pop-up event series that went through the summer into the fall, where youth had the opportunity to access pro-social activities, have access to positive adult figures, rebuild social skills, and break down some of the social isolation that they experienced in the last couple of years due to COVID. And so the organizations that you see here are those that received funding for the pop-up event series that again began early summer and went into the fall and will end at the end of this month. The following is data on the pop-up event series that includes providing you with a list of programming that was offered and some of the data that includes some of the numbers of actual participants. And the overall series really did lead to very specific highlights that I wanted to bring awareness to. That includes the expansion of soccer clinics to high school students in Aurora, the support of school registration, school re-engagement activities, which were super critical, especially for a lot of our youth that had been homeschooled due to COVID, and access to codes, school supplies, but also access to conflict resolution classes and workshops that focused around mental health to ensure that they had the ability to build on some of those life skills that we were looking for them to build. And lastly, also wanted to highlight that a lot of these youth were able to connect and build relationships with providers that now have become a support system that will be there to provide support to these youth and families in the long run, which is really important, and it's something that we look to have in our community. Here is a program recap for you all. These are very specific actions that we've moved forward with since the beginning of the program. As far as the program infrastructure, as Carice mentioned, we've really focused on developing policies and procedures, developing our work groups, the completion of the assessment, moving into the intervention, the development of the community crisis responses, specifically after the current shootings that did occur, direct services to at-risk youth, and a lot of work around the prevention, which focuses on a lot of what I've spoken on. That also includes increasing the capacity of some of our internal and external stakeholders around awareness of actual current resources and services that are available within our communities to ensure that they're connecting youth to the proper organizations as the needs come up. For next steps, the program will focus on hiring the remainder of the staff, releasing the notice of funding opportunity, continuing to work with the work of the work groups, and then completing the community assessment report and strategic plan. And so now I will open it up to any questions that council may have.
Mayor?
Questions of member of council. Questions from council.
Yes, Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. Was this your presentation? The PowerPoint, for example, and all the other documents? Because I noticed on the PowerPoint, it's actually disappeared from my eScribe, but earlier when I reviewed it, it says rmpartnership.org at the bottom. So was it written by them?
Yes, the report that highlights the preliminary strategies was written by Rocky Mountain Partnerships. Rocky Mountain Partnerships is an organization that has actively been helping us with the community assessment and the facilitation of our community mobilization team, just to ensure that we have an outside neutral party gathering the data, assessing the data, and then essentially will provide the final report to the city and our stakeholders.
Okay, and then on all the different the monies that that have already been spent. For example, the soccer, I didn't see the yoga. I know you guys did a pop-up yoga event, the back to school, all those. Did you track that in terms of the participants, the contact information, and follow up with those participants?
I don't have the actual contact information of those participants, but I'm sure I can go back to some of the organizations and collect some of that information.
Okay,
especially for
so I think that's really important if we're going to actually help the youth and follow them through, the various different programs that you're going to put together, is to be able to have that contact information, follow up and then say, okay, now we have something else happening. Would you like to participate? So I'd like to see really some accountability there. But the other question is on the funding. I don't know how these were determined, like who got what in terms of funding, but did you have to do an RFP, or how was that funded, or how was that determined? Who would get funding?
Yes, there were two opportunities, notice of funding opportunities the community received. So that included notification via our social media efforts, through our communications team, through distribution lists. Anyone in the community was able to apply for funding. Organizations were then asked to participate in a Q&A session where they received more detailed information of the requirements, the documentation that needed to be submitted. There was a review panel that reviewed the applications. So there was a scorecard that we used. And then once those organizations were selected, we did have an agreement in place to provide reimbursement funding to those organizations.
Okay, so I had heard kind of through the grapevine that one of the participants actually bought himself a pickup truck with taxpayer funds. So I think it's a great program. I'm very supportive of the youth violence prevention program, and this is not personal. I'm this way on every nonprofit that we give money to, because it is taxpayer monies, is just accountability and making sure that the results we receive are really effective and that we're really moving forward to make change in their lives in terms of, giving them resources. I think a lot of them probably wouldn't be interested in some of these activities because they may be too far along and need more intervention. But I think, I think we really need to tighten down on how we give the funding out and have, I don't know what that criteria is. I'd like to see that as well. And then my final question is on the strategies. You have like strategy for develop program policies and procedures and training standards of the staff, but then strategy 1 is hire the remaining staff. So I just want to make sure that when you're hiring, that they know what their expectations are for the position, and that we have, the overall program strategy in place with everything and the policies. It seems a little bit backwards, but maybe you're hiring and developing that simultaneously. So just wanted to make those points. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And some the funding for Heavy Hands, Heavy Hearts, that's tied to the purchase of the truck that happened 4 years, I think 3 or 4 years before my time. So that was a separate funding opportunity that was provided. That organization did not receive any funding through the pop-up event series this year. The performance measures moving forward and even through the pop-up event series was a very important factor that we wanted to have in place to ensure that we're funding organizations that are where we are seeing some level of success. The work of the pop-up events will not result in necessarily a huge change in behavioral change because it is a primary prevention effort. It's truly focused on ensuring that youth have access to safe spaces, pro-social activities, and access to community-based organizations. The work where we will start seeing some of the actual behavioral change will be done more so through the intervention response.
Okay, but you know how many people attended those events, right? Okay, all right. And are you, one last thing. Are you working with the police on some of this program? Because obviously it's public safety.
Yes, yeah. So the police have actively been involved since the get-go. I've been working with representatives from the gang unit, from the victim services unit, community relations, and then also crimes against children to identify families that they may be identifying that may need wraparound support from services or referrals, but also ways to support the community engagement that we're wanting to move forward. And our work is critical to ensure that we're supporting a law enforcement response. They're taking the lead on the investigatory public safety. We're taking the lead on intervention and prevention efforts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Further questions?
Mayor, Councilmember Lawson.
Councilmember Lawson.
Yes, thank you, Christina, for all your work, and thank you for the presentation. The question I have for you, I know that one of the goals or the objectives of the program, which I think should have been done a while ago, was to add the additional staffing. Because as you know, the outreach workers, they're the gap that are to get to the resources. And the reason I bring this up, because I've been out in the community talking to probation, judicial, magistrate judges. They have a lot of kids right now that are serving gun charges in detention, but we don't have any resources. We don't have any referrals. They're asking you and the city about the referrals, but we don't have any place for them to go. So that I know the outreach workers are important. So can you tell me, because it seems like there's sometimes a delay, what's your time frame to get these additional outreach workers so we can have this program staffed?
Yes, really good question. And so where we're at with the hiring is an offer was just made to a second outreach worker. Currently, I'm working with the HR department to hire the remainder of the staff. So we should have the remainder of the staff on board by end of January, early February, to be able to expand on some of the intervention and secondary prevention efforts. We have been communicating with some of our partners that we are actively taking referrals. And so our criminal justice partners do have the ability to take referrals. The primary focus right now has been on at-risk behaviors, just because I'm building the policy and procedure and also building the capacity for us to provide that more intense intervention response.
So Mayor, can I ask an additional question?
Please proceed.
Okay, so the question I have is on your intervention committee. The people that I know that sit on that committee, and again, I'm bringing up, we have kids right now that are at risk, that are in detention. Once they complete their sentences, they're going to come back out into the community, and then we don't have any resources. So this committee, from what I've heard, it's been just all talk and no action about how you're going to address that. That's why I'm asking, I'm glad you are reaching out to the judicial, because again, they have a lot of kids right now that are needing referrals, and it doesn't seem like it's happening. I mean, I know you're saying it's happening, but it's not. So I guess what is going to be with this committee in particular, the intervention, which I think is really, really important right now. I mean, we're doing prevention, but intervention is really important. So I guess, how are you addressing that issue in this committee, and how is it going to be more robust in addressing the intervention that we need at this current stage?
Yeah. And I have to say that the work of the intervention group has focused on both at-risk and high-risk youth. And so those are two very specific different populations of youth that we have to serve. Right now, we're just starting to build a response to serving at-risk youth. Those are the youth that are running away. Those are the youth that are starting to get expelled from school. Those are the youth that are starting to exhibit some at-risk behaviors. What the work group has been focusing on is developing essentially what will become our multidisciplinary team. In order for me to be able to provide that direct service, that intervention direct service, I need to be able to have the additional staff, but also the processes for the intervention team, the multidisciplinary team, in order for us to get those referrals and provide those supports. The youth that are coming out of the detention facility, that's a reentry strategy. And so I have to ensure that we're providing the supports and providing it effectively, which is why we're starting with at-risk, we'll move to intervention, and then we'll move to intervention or the reentry category. This is a completely brand new program, and it's going to take time. It's going to take processes. It's going to take ensuring that we have the proper process in place to have information sharing with some of our criminal justice partners. Again, some of our criminal justice partners are already referring to us. The ability for them to refer is there. I just don't have the ability right now to provide that re-entry piece because we're just starting to build that at-risk response.
Mayor, can I ask one more question, then I'll
Please proceed.
council members, because I don't want to take over all the.
No, that's fine. I think your questions are important, so please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So on the slide where you have all of the individuals that were given funding, you know, what I find interesting is that to me, that should have been a spreadsheet that actually allocates who the funding was given to, how much was given to the person. You guys also did a survey. How much did that cost? You know, you could put $70,000 as an arbitrary number in a slide, but to me, it doesn't really, and I'm just saying, to me, it lacks transparency, that particular slide, because you say $70,000. But, you know, how much was given to each organization? What was it given for? Who was it? What was the purpose? What are the results? And in the end, how, you know, you put $70,000 in there, but were they given $1,500 in advance? Are they getting a reimbursement? I just think that this is kind of lacking transparency in terms of how this funding is being utilized and who's making those decisions. So I know that might be a question that you might have to dig into, but I just think that you could put $70,000, $80,000 in a slide and say, okay, we believe it. And I'm not saying, I'm not putting anything out on you. I'm just saying that it doesn't look very transparent. So I guess for me, can you provide me one example on that slide of how much money you gave to an organization, pre and pro?
All the organizations were funded on a reimbursement basis, so they did have to provide the supporting documentation in order for us to process the payment reimbursement. The organizations received anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, $10,000 being the cap. The first round of funding, organizations were able to apply for up to $10,000. The second round of funding, they were able to apply for up to $5,000. So it does look different. the amount for the surveys that were done, that was in collaboration with Aurora Youth for, it's an organization under
Partners for Thriving Youth.
Yep.
Yes. And they helped cover the cost for the surveys. The overall cost of the surveys isn't part of the 70,000. That was a separate cost, and it was under 400. The surveys did include, again, over 600 youth, primarily youth and adults in Aurora, that provided their perspective for the community assessment.
Mayor, I'll give it to some other council members to ask questions. Christina, thank you for addressing those questions. I would like to come back though, Mayor.
Okay, very well.
Mayor.
Further questions or comments from council?
Mayor.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Christina, for the presentation. I just want to echo Councilmember Lawson's comments around the intervention and reentry portion and making sure that we actually, hire up. I think that's really, really important, and I'm excited to hear that that's actually underway. But I did have a question regarding, I guess the root causes here. I see that we're kind of coming in when things, based off of the flow chart, we're coming in when things are already underway, and we're trying to intervene and to redirect. What about the upstream causes, the actual root causes of folks getting into this, pipeline, for lack of a better word? And is that something that you're looking at through this program? And when can we expect some kind of recommendations for council action on that?
That's part of the comprehensive plan that we're implementing. We're wanting to make sure that it's a multi-layered response to address specifically what you just mentioned. That's inclusive of the primary prevention and the secondary prevention. So that primary prevention really focuses on how do we implement public awareness campaigns? How do we change the norm of the community around violent behavior? How do we empower the community, bring awareness of resources, services? How do we implement some of that primary prevention efforts through some of our stakeholders? Some of those strategies are included, as well as that secondary prevention, which really targets those individuals that are just starting to exhibit high-risk behavior or at-risk behaviors, to ensure that they don't get further involved in some of the gangs, for example. Or if we have someone that's coming from a generational gang family, we want to ensure that we're targeting those youth and we're providing supports, wraparound supports for the youth and the family, in order for there to be some shift in behavior to prevent them from getting more involved deeper into some of those behaviors. And some of those actions are also part of the strategy to include the implementation of the Strengthening Families curriculum. That curriculum really focuses on identifying those youth, but also those parents, to ensure that we're providing those parents the conflict resolution, the parenting skills, in order for them to support their youth when they're getting involved in some of those risky behaviors and prevent any further concern.
All right, thank you.
Further questions of staff?
Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
Thank you. So I had questions about the early 2022 efforts, specifically with respect to the violence interruption. I know that's something that, in the situation we're in, is very important. And then also I'll have a second question about the school-based funding. But so for the violence interruption, what are the kinds of criteria? And then also, how, more of an overall question, out of this $500,000, how is that broken down across intervention, secondary prevention, and primary prevention, in terms of the proportion of that money going to each?
So as far as the amounts that are broken down, and let me go back to that slide. As far as the amounts that are broken down for each of these three categories, the majority of it will go towards intervention, and the smallest amount will go towards primary prevention efforts. As far as the violence interrupter, as far as criteria, are you asking like what that work will look for, or how we will fund?
Right, like how is it going to be determined who's getting that funding? Essentially, what are some of the criteria that you all have for what would be a successful program in that area?
Okay. The use of a violence interrupter is a national model that comes out of Ceasefire, Cure Violence. Locally, Denver has been using violence interrupters. Some of the criteria that we'll look for when we're funding an organization to do that work is a prior knowledge base and ability to be able to go in the community and have that level of impact when it comes to directly connecting with those most likely involved in some of the incidents that are occurring, some of those violent incidents occurring in the community, and being able to have an influence to reduce the likelihood of retaliatory behaviors. So that's the primary goal, and also ensuring that they have the staff that can not just connect with youth, but also with some of the young adults and adults that may be involved in some of those behaviors, and willingness to work collaboratively with not just my program staff, but with other stakeholders, to include criminal justice partners. We are looking to implement a regional approach when it comes to the use of violence interrupters. So we will look to train new violence interrupters both in Denver and Aurora simultaneously to ensure that when needed, we can implement and activate that regional response, since we know that a lot of the violent incidents do include individuals from both cities.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And then on the school-based funding, I know that at one point we had been looking at the Keep the Lights On, like kind of after hours drop-in program that we had set aside some funding to pursue. So is that the kind of program in terms of school-based programming that you all are looking at, or are there other types of partnerships with schools that you're looking at developing?
It's more of a different type of approach we're going to be taking. I have been working with district level representatives and representatives from very specific schools that are the most impacted currently by some of the violent crime incidents that are happening. What we're looking at possibly funding are the funding for family engagement activities. Looking to implement a curriculum that can ensure that the youth are learning crime prevention approaches, bullying prevention, victimization, just to ensure that they are learning the life skills in order for them to be successful. We're looking at funding other activities specific to each of the schools based on their needs. There's some schools that are looking to get supports for very specific resource rooms where they can have resources, immediate resources for the youth and families to ensure that the youth are the most prepared and can be more successful in their schooling.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions to staff?
Mayor.
I'm sorry, who was the first time?
Dustin can go first.
So eventually I'll be able to recognize new voices, but right now I don't. Okay? Councilmember Durinsky, please proceed.
I have a couple of questions. My first question is, are you looking for any county support on this? Are we looking to partner at all with the county? And my second question is, are these organizations providing budgets when they are coming to the city, requesting this funding? Are they providing actual budgets?
Yes, to both. So as far as county participation, they've been actively participating in all three of the work groups. So the steering committee, the intervention work group, and some representation at the community mobilization team. We have representation from both Adams County, Arapahoe County, and then also Denver County through that regional approach, and ensuring that we're partnering with all the key departments. So for example, we have representatives from the Department of Human Services for all the different counties. We have connections to the criminal justice partners, to the schools. And so that connection to the counties are very, very important, just to ensure that we have that wraparound comprehensive response that we're looking for. And then as far as the budget, yes, the organizations, as part of their application, are one of the requirements is they do submit a budget, both a budget or explaining how the funds will be used, but also an agency or an organizational budget, just to give us some insight into how they're getting other funding and ensure they have additional funds to ensure their success. moving forward as part of the NOFO, we will ensure that we have a proper budget in place before we accept or as far as part of the application process.
And then what is the accountability? What does the accountability look like? They present us with a budget, you know, we fund their organization. What is the accountability piece?
For the pop-up, since we've only funded the pop-up event series, and that hasn't been large sums of money, it's been it's not going to be the same process we're going to look at implementing for some of the larger funding opportunities that we're going to be moving forward with. For the pop-up event series, we wanted to ensure that the organizations were providing the supporting documentation along with their request. And so it was very specific to include the budget line item of what they're requesting reimbursement for, and then proper receipts for documentation outlining and supporting that request that was being made. So for example, if an organization was originally granted $10,000, but they were only able to provide documentation for $7,000, then they only received the $7,000 out of the 10.
Okay.
And Jessica, do you want to add anything else around how we're going to ensure there's accountability for the larger budget oversight?
I would just say we have, you know, standard reimbursement request forms. And so we'll do a training with all of the grantees. It's all outlined specifically, you know, an agreement that they sign and we sign. And so when we're getting a reimbursement request, we're looking at that budget along with all the backup documentation that Christina just spoke to. And if it's not there, we usually go back and ask for it. And then, you know, we mentioned with this, some of the feedback we've gotten from community groups is they're not able to front some of those larger amounts of money, you know, on hand. And so we'll work with each of them individually. And if it is something where they're asking for, you know, payment upfront, we'll either pay a vendor directly so that we know it's going to an exact place, or we'll work with them through a performance report if that has to happen. But mostly all of the grant money that we put out is on a reimbursement basis, and we're asking for their financials and things like that to make sure that they have the ability to, you know, follow through on the funding that's requested.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments of staff?
Mayor Zvonek.
Councilmember Zvonek.
Thank you. Christina, thanks for your presentation. I have just two quick questions. The first is I'm read through your presentation, a lot of information about prevention, and as Councilmember Lawson said, there's probably a greater emphasis needed on intervention, but I think there's kind of a third leg of this stool, and that's deterrence. And I don't know if this is something that your program, if this is where you work with APD, and is this, because there doesn't seem to be anything in the program that you've outlined in the presentation we've seen that talks about deterrence. So I'm wondering, is this their sole responsibility, or is there collaboration there? And if so, what does that look like?
No, that's some of that suppression deterrence effort isn't part of the strategic plan, just because the program's primary focus right now has been on the prevention and the intervention piece. I would say in the future, maybe a couple of years down the line, some of that more comprehensive suppression effort can happen, but we have to be able to build the capacity of the team, build the capacity internally to support some of those efforts. I know that APD is actively working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, for example, on the Project Safe Neighborhoods, and they have a lot of other active efforts where some of that activity is already happening. The partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office, for example, is really important. They're working with APD on a suppression plan, but they also have an intervention plan where they're working with myself, other stakeholders in the community to use a bonds interrupter approach to help with some of that suppression, community level suppression effort, while law enforcement is handling that law enforcement suppression approach.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, youth violence is an issue that's impacting our city right now. And of course, we want to get to prevention and intervention, but we have to do something about preventing it. And that's even, you know, a part of your mission statement talks about the need to, it says reduce the impact of it, should just be reduce youth violence, period. And it seems like deterrence is something we can do more immediately while we're working on these other things. My second question is, this weekend there was an article in the Denver Post about the youth violence in Aurora, and your quote was that, that we are really behind, that we are 15 to 20 years behind Denver. And so reading that made me wonder, in what ways do you see us being behind Denver, and what are those immediate, and maybe this is it, right? What are those immediate steps that we can take to catch us up? Because that doesn't seem acceptable to be that far behind our neighbor.
Yeah, and we are behind, and that Denver has, my program, for example, is essentially trying to duplicate the efforts of 3 different city organizations. And so 2 of those organizations have been around for a couple of decades. And so in order for us to be able to implement programming the way Denver is implementing, we have just a ton of work to be able to do, to be able to support that comprehensive response that does include the prevention, the intervention, and the suppression approach. It's something that's going to take us several years to be able to get to the same level of response that Denver has. The other major difference that we have to tackle here in Aurora is that our city falls in several different counties. And so we have to also consider our work with some of the different counties, the different structures, and the different policies that are in place.
Further questions or comments of staff?
Mayor Sundberg?
Councilmember Sundberg.
My question refers to immediacy also. Christina, thank you for the work you're doing. And while you're still implementing strategy and goals, what are some immediate examples of rapport building with youth, whether through staff or volunteers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say we're doing that through a couple of different paths. The first one is through the work of our outreach specialist. So he's actively going out to the community and just ensuring that he has a presence at some of these community events, outreaching to providers, but also connecting directly with youth to ensure that he becomes that in-person resource and support in the community. And that's something that we'll be able to expand and do once we hire additional staff. That's something that nationally has been, it's a strategy that's used through the work of outreach workers, is just them actively being in the community so the community starts recognizing them. So if something does come up, if someone needs support, if someone has a question around a resource, if he's working with the client and 2 years from now, 1 year from now, they are being targeted by a gang, then they know that Art is the person that they can go to.
Okay, so you've got one person doing that now. How many do you hope to have boots on the ground with that role?
2 more outreach workers.
And the pop-up events, how did you advertise those events?
It was done primarily through the work of the organizations getting the funding, but our communications team has been very instrumental in helping market our overall efforts. They did a ton of work advertising through social media, through our web pages, through some of the other listservs that we have access to or that our network has access to. So we just try to get the word out as much as possible.
And what were a couple of your more popular pop-up events?
Some of the more popular ones, I would say the more popular ones, what we saw was the most impactful were the ones that have the more structured, more collaborative effort with the schools, for example, where a large number of parents, for example, were provided very targeted, very strategic supports that were part of a larger long-term response.
Were they fun? So youth were involved and they were fun and engaging for youth?
Yes. Youth were in attendance. And when we talk about youth, we're talking 10 to 24. So some of the younger youth were there. Some of the grade school kids were there. For the most part, our Youth Advisory Council, which is another way we're engaging, our Youth Advisory Council was actively at all of the, or most of the, if not all of the pop-up events to ensure they were recruiting other youth, to ensure they were interacting with other youth. And they've actually been critical in ensuring that we have the group that we have right now.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff?
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson.
I don't have a question. I know we have to address the question before us, but I also have a recommendation that I would like to be considered by the full council.
Please proceed.
Okay, do you want to address that first question, or you want me to go with my recommendation first?
Okay, I'm sorry. Your first question or the recommendation?
Well, Mayor, we have a question.
Oh, the first question before us.
Do you want me to go with my recommendation?
Is your recommendation in any way tied to the first question?
No, it is not. It's
okay. Very well. Then let's proceed with the first question, and then we'll go to your recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Very well. Are there further questions or comments?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. This is regarding the question, because I don't think this is ready for that question yet. I think personally, I would like to see a little bit, like based on the questions that were asked today, maybe some follow-up before we just are supportive of releasing $500,000. I still have some questions, and, there were some that weren't able to be completely answered today. So that would be, my recommendation would be just maybe have another opportunity to get some more feedback before we fund programs. I also didn't see any volunteer component to this, because there's a lot of mentoring programs that are currently out there for the youth. And I don't know if we're even seeking those partnerships. They don't require funding. They just are volunteer organizations.
Very well. Is it your, Mayor Pro Tem, is it your desire then to defer the question until the next regular study session where we will revisit this issue with the opportunity to ask questions, follow-up questions?
That would be my recommendation, but I would also, Councilmember Lawson, maybe, I don't know if she would agree to, not release the funds until we come back with a little bit more information.
Mayor, just my opinion. I know we have other council members that have voiced on this as well. I think that it needs to be I would like to know more about how this funding is going to be allocated. I know we have an immediate need and we have to kind of, keep with the progress. But in terms of releasing this funding, I think that there's some gaps and some concerns that we need to address. So I'm not going to support this going forward right now.
Very well. Is there any objection?
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. Just like a quick question to my colleagues. I'm seeing here that we actually in February would get to review the presentation of funding nominations that would come to us. So what we're discussing here is not letting $500,000 go out the door. It's allowing staff to move forward with the funding application process that then we can review it later.
Okay, very well. Let me put this out on the floor, and then
Mayor, can I
let me just say that there's a question before us, and I need to get a sense of the council. And the question before us is to delay. I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead then.
Sorry, because Councilmember Marcano made a good point. My concern though is I don't think the criteria is right.
Okay.
For going out for funding. So
what I'm going to do right now is frame your question. And then we're going to have discussion. That's okay with you. Okay, so the question before us then is whether to delay making this decision to move forward until the next study session where members will have an opportunity to ask follow-up questions to staff. And so is there objection? And then we'll go to discussion.
Oh, sorry. I do have a question about that question.
Councilmember Combs.
Okay. So I guess my question is, are we saying delay everything that staff have presented to us, or just delay the notice of funding for the 500,000? Because I think we should still be trying to hire the staff we need to hire.
That's Mayor.
Councilmember Lawson.
That's what I interpret it to be, to hold off on the 500,000, because I would like to get more information on the criteria and what is being used. Our next study session, if this calendar is approved, is January 3rd. So that's what I'm not saying delay the whole thing. I'm saying delaying this part.
And Mayor,
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I also do not mean delay the hiring.
Okay, very well. Okay, further discussion? So if I understand the question, then it is not to delay the hiring, but it is the for staff that would be working for the city of Aurora, but it does delay the program funding to be contracted for. Okay, is there objection? Seeing none, then that is the direction for staff, and we will reconvene then on this agenda item on the January 3rd study session.
Mayor.
Councilmember, oh, and then Councilmember Lawson, you still have another point. I'm sorry.
Mayor and council, I'm bringing up a recommendation that I would like for council to consider. And then also, this is regarding the structure of the program. And currently right now, the program sits in housing and community services. It's underneath community engagement, along with our mental health and co-responder program as well. I think that this program, and I'm asking for a discussion on this as well, should be removed from this overall umbrella of housing and community services, specifically civic engagement, and placed under public safety. It aligns with public safety. I think that it meets in the mission statement that is on here. The mission of the Aurora Youth Violence Prevention is to enhance public safety to reduce the impact of youth violence in Aurora communities. And I would like, Mayor, I don't know how you want to proceed if this is discussion, but that's my proposal, my recommendation that I'd like for council to consider. And I know that on the next study session of January 3rd, if I get the council support, I would like this to be brought back to council to see how that structure would look and how that would be defined.
Very well. A question for the city attorney?
Yes.
Dan, so this particular question, so what Councilmember Lawson is asking the council to consider is a restructuring of the program to place it in the Aurora Police under the Aurora Police Department.
It's not the Aurora Police Department. It's our public safety.
Okay, public safety department. Okay, and so how do we proceed with that? Does that, at this point?
And that can actually be done by the city manager, can actually restructure the departments. And then if there is a piece that needs to be redone, the manager can bring that forward as an ordinance once council determines the manager's proposal.
Well, Dan, this is going to be determined by council and not by the city manager.
Okay.
And so I think the question is, how do we proceed to bring it to a vote, to bring what Councilmember Lawson wants to do to a vote? How do we proceed in that regard?
So you would bring it back at the next study session. We can then bring it forward either as a motion or as a resolution to direct the city manager to actions.
Mayor,
Councilmember Lawson.
I'm asking to do this now and to bring this back I'm asking for the recommendation to get the support of council, either yes or no, and to bring back the structure and how it would look underneath an umbrella. And I don't understand why I have to wait till the January 3rd study session. I'm actually bringing this now for a recommendation for council to decide or not.
Okay.
If I have 6 votes, then I should be, or 6 people, then I should be able to move forward. Mayor?
Okay, Dan, so if there is a sense of the council where there's a majority of the council, meaning that there are 6 votes, 6 supporters, right? Then that doesn't that in and of itself direct the city manager to make that structural change?
Yes, and you can add formality, as much formality to that as you wish.
Mayor?
Well, no, I can, then we'll do it here. Then we'll do it in this meeting. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, so Previously we used to have a grip and then it was not funded because we lost the photo red light revenue. So it was really under public safety at that time. I don't know if it went further, but I support it being under the public safety umbrella.
Mayor.
Councilmember Gardner.
So we don't have a public safety department. We have a police department, we have a fire department. So unless the proposal is to have the youth violence program be its own department and report directly to a deputy city manager, but we don't have a public safety department. And I'm not supportive simply from the reason that I think it should be up to the city manager how he wants to structure the city. I don't want to get into micromanaging how he thinks the department should work and where they should sit. I don't think that having the program on the level of the water department or the public works department or the police department is appropriate. And I think that where you sit in the organization doesn't always necessarily translate to what you're going to get done. And so I don't necessarily think that having this group, which is, it sounds like being proposed to be its very own department and would have a department director ahead of it, which would be a pay increase for the person in charge of that department, necessarily means that they're going to be any more or less effective.
Okay, I think you're, objectively, there's a good point in terms of the fact that there is not a Department of Public Safety. And so let me then refer back to Councilmember Lawson. So we have a public safety committee, but Councilmember Lawson, it would be the Aurora Police Department, I would think.
Well, I guess what I need to understand, looking at the overall org chart that I looked at, I mean, we have Jason Batchelor, that's kind of that's within these certain levels, that's underneath his department, which he has police, fire, and I'm not sure what else he has. So I guess I'm just trying to understand what is his level there that I thought was considered, because he deals with those public safety.
Right. And Councilmember Lawson, I think he has responsibility for public safety, meaning police and fire. But if you want to have him, if you want to have this as a separate entity that we report directly to Jason Batchelor, I mean, that could be done. But I think
that's what I saw on the org chart. So maybe I'm not understanding the umbrella of that org chart, but I see that Jason Batchelor, it doesn't mean that this goes into the police department, but he is over police, fire, and then I don't have the org chart in front of me. I was reviewing it this weekend. So I'm saying whatever that structure is, I just believe those three programs in addition, they need to be removed from civic engagement. It just doesn't work underneath that. This is a partly civic engagement. I would give it like 2%, but this is not working underneath that structure, that immediate structure. And then the program is being compared to animal services and code enforcement. So I don't know what Jason Batchelor's role is, but that's what I was looking under. I'm not saying have its own structure. I'm just saying underneath some bigger umbrella.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, when you look at org charts, doesn't mean it has to be a direct on the same level as police, fire, 911, those planning, whatever departments. It could be under, let's say, Deputy City Manager Jason Batchelor, and it can be lower in the hierarchy, but with across, like across from not under police, but across with its own division or department, and it doesn't have to be. We don't have to escalate it to be like equivalent.
But it's just that it would then have a director that would report directly to Jason Batchelor. There'd be no other way to do it, I think. Councilmember Coombs.
Yeah, so when we first talked about this program, as well as the Aurora Mobile Response Team, we had also talked about a program manager, a mental health program manager that would be over those programs. And so I guess my question is, where is that person in the org chart? Have we even hired that person? And wouldn't that person be the one that would report to Deputy City under this hypothetical or this proposal that person would report to Deputy Manager Bachelor, and then these programs would be under that. Like, I thought that that was the idea as we were having those conversations, was when we first budgeted all of these positions, was that that person would actually be over these multiple other programs that were related to mental health. So I don't know where we're at with that.
Yes, City Manager.
Yeah, the program manager over the mental health program has been hired, is in charge of the mobile response team, which is part of the Housing and Community Services Department. This program was put in the Housing and Community Services Department for the support that it will receive from similar types of programs like mobile response, like the community development, CDBG programs, home programs, very similar public-facing outreach type programs that we have. We've gone down this route before with a homelessness program that was placed under Deputy City Manager Bachelor probably 4 years ago. And Councilmember Lawson was one of the major critics of that program. And part of the problem was, as a standalone office, didn't receive the support that it needed to be successful. So the homelessness services person was out there on an island by herself and didn't have the support of a department. So this was placed the way it is so that it would have other support, administrative support, clerical support, and also have the support of the other programs like the mental health program, the mobile response team, like the community engagement team. The other thing is Councilmember Lawson keeps saying that this is failing where it is today. I'd like to know what the criteria is that it's failing. I would also say that when this program was first discussed by council was the one that said, we'll hire three positions initially, and we'll wait to see how it's doing before we hire 3 more. And now I feel like the program is being criticized because they haven't hired those other 3 positions. So
Mayor,
there's just a lot at work here.
Mayor, I would like to address Mr. Trombley. I think that he's trying to kind of say some things about me. Yes, when I addressed the Shelley program, when Shelley was over the homeless program, and there was a lot of issues with that, this situation is different. The leadership that is above Christina, they're not allowing her to do their job. When a leadership such as the director goes out and tells community members not to speak to a council member, that is wrong. Those individuals, Jessica Prosner, Therese, yourself, need to stay in the lane. You're supposed to be helping us to strive to make these programs good instead of going out and criticizing a council member for not wanting to be a part of a situation. I am concerned about this program. I have talked to many people in the community, and they are saying the program is confusing. They don't know which direction they're going because you have Christina, who is the expert, giving advice, and then you have her leadership telling them something different. So I guess you think that I'm just lying when I'm telling you what I'm hearing and meeting with the community. So, you know, I mean, to sit here and to demean me on this, I'm telling you what I'm hearing from the community. People are calling me about the program. Myself and the mayor went out and put our political will out here to make this program, to have a program, to have funding, and it was supported by our council colleagues. I am concerned about the direction. So I'm sorry if you feel the way you feel, but this is like, you know, I mean, the program needs to be underneath a different umbrella because currently it's not working underneath this current structure. It's been formulated. We've been having it for a year. So that's my criticism, and that's what I'm hearing from the community.
And
further discussion.
I never say you're lying, council member. I don't believe you're lying. I think we have a difference of opinion. And I do believe that the department is supportive of this program, extremely supportive, and wants it to be successful.
Further discussion, Councilmember Cruz.
So I guess my only question is just given the nature of the program and the kind of qualifications, training, and work of the people that are doing the work in this program, which is all within kind of social work and mental health. Is there a reason not to put that under the mental health program manager or mental health program versus under community engagement? And I know that's, absolutely is a city manager decision and a city management decision to make. But my question is just given that relationship, that nexus to mental health, is like, would it make sense to put it there?
Well, and I will say, from discussions that we've had with Councilmember Lawson, the concern that she's brought up, we are looking at, is this the correct alignment for this program? And so it is something that we've been considering. What's the optimum place for this program, and in terms of reporting structure? So, I think we can within the next week make a recommendation as far as where it should be placed in order to do its best.
Mayor, I have a question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Where was Yvpp? Who ran that?
Mayor, I don't know who.
Could staff please answer that question?
Certainly, Mayor. This is Jason Batchelor. Yvpp was a program that was run by the Aurora Police Department out of the Aurora for Youth program.
Very well.
I'm sorry, out of the what program? The Yvpp, you said out of the Aurora something?
Was the Aurora for Youth program in the Aurora Police Department.
Aurora for Youth. And there was a supervisor?
Yes, her name was Dawn, and I don't know her last name because I was part of that committee. So in 2016 through 2017, I was part of the Yvpp committee. That's why I know a little bit about it and how it was structured and what kind of things were going on. And so, yes, but I don't know her last name.
Can I chime in, Mayor?
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, I was part of Yvpp from pretty much its inception there at Moorhead. So I could certainly, it was Don Barrett, who's who you're talking about for the city. So I was part of that gang task force with Moorhead being one of the places to recommend youth to go to in the programs at that site. So yeah, it was under that umbrella, whichever, I'm not sure what the department, I know it was under police and the gang task force and so on, and other community members from the JAC and other agencies.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lawson, so two things. I think one is if you want to deliberate a little bit longer on specifically where you think it should be and put forward that proposal, I suspect on January 3rd, when we're going to go ahead and defer much of this anyway until January 3rd. Would you like me to get a sense of the council at this time, or would you prefer to delay until January 3rd and have a little bit more time?
Well, I would like to get a sense of the council because it looks like Councilmember Coombs presented something. I have went with my recommendation. So that is what I'm proposing, but I mean, I like to get a sense from the council, I guess.
Okay, then let me make sure that I understand the proposal, and that is that it be moved from its current location to form as a department, or I guess with a program manager that reports directly to Jason Batchelor.
But it would have the mental health co-responder, youth prevention program. Those programs will be underneath this. I do agree with Councilmember Coombs that it should be underneath that mental health person.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Coombs, and where does that report to right now?
That's still within housing and community services.
Okay.
Mayor, I just wanted to respond to that. So the Aurora Mobile Response Team has a program manager who's hired. That person's name is Courtney, and she oversees the 2 contracts that we have for that. That program manager reports to Lana Dalton, our homelessness program manager. This is intentional due to the behavioral health related things. Lana is a licensed clinical social worker as well. She's also stood up these programs before in other places. And so she has that experience in that program is successful and going well. So the mobile response team reports to Lana, Lana reports to me. The youth violence program is under our community engagement division within the department. That was intentional in that, we're reaching out to faith-based, to neighbors, to other community-based organizations, just like we do through our, traditional neighborhood liaison program and other things like that. And so those two programs are currently separate within two different divisions within the department. So I just wanted to make that clear in terms of how it's currently separated out. I think some of the original conversations last winter was that the mobile response team and the youth violence would be in the same division. But given where we had expertise in the ability for having oversight, and for example, when you have, behavioral health, you need that expertise to be able to have that supervision for those different behavioral health. So those are separated out now into two different divisions within the department. Just wanted to make that clear.
So Mayor, what I'll do is, since I would like to maybe see by the January 3rd meeting, I would like to get more information on the restructuring, so maybe a defined decision can be made about the where this program lies. I do not support this program underneath its current structure, so I'm just being very open about that. But January 3rd, I would like for this to come back to study session with the additional questions that council has addressed, to see to get more information about this construction, as Mr. Twombly has mentioned.
Okay, Dan, structurally, there's no problems there. I mean, do we need to do anything else?
No, it's moving from a study session to a study session. So, and council has their prerogative to put something on the study session. So that's exactly what's happened.
Okay, very well. So I think what we need to ask is there objection? I think we already did this. There's no objection to moving to the January 3rd meeting for the decision for us in terms of the program funding allocation. Am I correct in that? Is there any objection? Very well, then that will occur. That is the direction of staff. Item number 3B, historic landmark nomination, Aurora Fire Station number 5, 1339 North Airport Boulevard. Staff presentation.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you very much for your time tonight. My name is Drake Brownfield. I'm the Historic Preservation Specialist for the City of Aurora, as well as the Staff Liaison for the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the Aurora Fire Station number 5 landmark nomination. And I also wish to extend my thanks to members of the Public Works Department and the Pros Department for helping make this nomination possible. I'm sorry. Here is a slide of the location and context. It's in Ward 2. You can see that it's near the intersection of Colfax and Airport. The building, it is international contemporary architectural styles, which inherently are not as decorative or not decorative in the same way as some of our other landmarks. At 50 years old, it would be our youngest landmark. It's one of Aurora Fire Department's earliest training centers that has really high historic integrity. That meaning that there have not been a lot of significant changes to the building. It remains city-owned and would join a large roster, about half of the landmarks that are currently city-owned. And right now, Open Space and Natural Resources, they house ranger staff and equipment in the building. This is a picture of the facade that faces east. Here are some pictures of the other elevations of the building. You can see in the top left, the AFD number 5 signage was removed for safety concerns so that citizens would not go to the building. It's no longer an active fire department building, and it was decided to avoid any safety concerns of the individuals seeking first aid or first response. But you can see in these other photos that the architecture, it favors verticality, and the construction materials being first and foremost. The brick is unpainted. The rock is, grouted rock. We found that Aurora Fire Station number 5, it's significant under criteria 1 and 3. 1 meaning how it ties to the overall broad cultural, political, economic, and social history of Aurora, and criteria on 3 whether the property embodies the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type, that being the international and contemporary styles. And its adherence under criteria 1 is the need for Aurora Fire Department Station number 5 in the rapidly growing city of Aurora in the early 50s and early 70s. Here you can see some historic maps, the top being a 1957 map and the bottom being a 1971 map. And you can see that the city rapidly expanded east in those intervening decades, and the need for a fire station, that being fire station number 5, became very great for the annexation of Sable, Altura, and Buckley. Here is just a few important dates in a timeline, as well as a Denver Post article clipping of Fire Station number 5 when it was completed in 1971. You can see in 1950 that the population was just over 11,000, and in 10 years it almost quintupled. And you can see the rapid building and completion of Fire Station to keep up with the demand that the increasing number of citizens required. 1971 Aurora Fire Station number 5 opens. Here are some great historic photographs that we were able to put together during the nomination. The bottom left being a photograph in 1974 that shows really well the facade as well as the southern elevation of the structure. And then the top right is a photo of current HPC Commissioner Michael Ackman with Big Red, the historic fire truck in 1984. And I also wish to thank Historic Preservation Commissioner Michael Ackman. He gave an oral history interview to help flesh out the nomination, as well as was an advocate for the nomination with the members of Aurora Fire Rescue, as well as other city staff. To speak quickly on the architecture, it's international and contemporary. Those styles emerged from post-World War II and favored modernism and functionality as well as optimism. That's the basis of many mid-century designs. This building embodies those designs with its modern building materials on display, its functionality being the primary driver of the building rather than ornamentation. They tend to have flat roofs and parapets like this building. They tend to have horizontal and vertical elements and emphasis. They normally have simple ornamentation as well as an asymmetrical entry. This one does deviate from the structure with its training tower that was built in the back of the building that made it a really significant structure for the fire department when it was completed. Here's a few more pictures of some of the functionality over really vibrant ornamentation. The stone wall on the photo in the left actually does serve a function. It is a safety precaution for some natural gas infrastructure that's right behind that wall. Just a few of our landmark benefits are on this slide, as well as our most recent landmarks, that being Straight Lumber, Carlson Holzer House that was built in 1911, and the Melvin Lewis Cemetery, that's number 31. We think that Aurora has a unique and interesting past, and that one of my chief ways of preserving that is through the built environment. We believe that landmarks help enhance a building's prestige as well as its property value. It can influence conditions in a positive way and property values in the surrounding neighborhood. And at a financial aspect, it allows grant funding and tax credits for rehabilitation costs. When a building is designated, I have managed grants under the State Historical Fund that's administered by History Colorado, and designating the structure would allow for some quite costly repairs to be funded in large part by the state. And I am happy to answer any questions and hear any comments.
Other questions of staff?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, just a comment. So I really appreciate that we're doing this. And I also recognize our firefighter, Ackman. He was quite a bit younger than I remember seeing him recently.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Gardner.
Councilmember Gardner.
So what is the purpose of this? So does it restrict what we can do with the building in the future? And if it doesn't, then what is it? Just so it says it on a piece of paper that it's a historic landmark? I guess I'm just not following.
Absolutely. The historic nomination, it allows for there's a plaque that's placed on the building. It really it doesn't come with a bevy of restrictions. What it does come with is there is incentive to keep the building and to not demolish the building. This is it's a case of adaptive reuse, that it was once a fire department building. Now it's a ranger station for Osner. But the way I see it, in order to preserve Aurora's unique past and very varied past with buildings that date to on our roster the 1860s to potentially the 1970s, is it enriches the built environment and the historic character of the city.
I wonder if you could answer Councilmember Gruber's question more specifically as to the restrictions that are placed on it.
Yes, if there are any alterations planned on the building's exterior that are major, if they are the additions, or if they contain additions or the demolition of part or all of the structure, that would be considered a major alteration. If the nomination goes through and the building is designated by City Council, those alterations are reviewed, I should say, by the Historic Preservation Commission, who can approve or deny with caveats.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Wouldn't we get some grant funding or some tax credits if we had to do anything to the building?
Designating the structure would unlock those fundings, those funding opportunities. If it is designated, that allows for a grant to be written to the grant funding that I know best is the State Historical Fund under History Colorado. And if it's designated, it would allow the city to put forth 25% of a project, and the state would match the remaining. But for alterations, the goal of the landmark nominations, it is to retain the building in its current or near current condition. So we saw that the building is significant in its current condition, and by designating this, it does not restrict, it does not deny the user of reasonable use inside, but it does add a few review steps to alterations to the exterior.
Okay. Further questions or comments? Is there any objection to moving this forward?
Mayor, I'm opposed.
I'm opposed as well. Is there any further objection?
Opposed.
I'm sorry?
Opposed, Councilmember Zvonek.
Okay, Councilmember Zvonek opposed. Is there any further opposition? What? I'm sorry. Is there further opposition? Councilmember Bergen?
Can I just get why it's being opposed? Is it restrictions?
Let me just say from my point of view that, I grew up here. I think it's a nice building. I don't think it's all that historic. But I'll say this, I've been in situations before in state government where it does put up an impediment to alter its use or to demolish the building altogether and develop another use.
Mayor.
Councilmember Gardner.
From my perspective, a similar reason. It's a city-owned building, so it's not going away tomorrow. And if there were plans for something in the future, certainly I think the council at that time could weigh in on it. But I think giving it this designation ties our hands for what we can do in the future. We've seen that in our neighbor to the west several times with historic landmark designations. And so I don't think it's appropriate. I just don't see the purpose.
Yeah, and I agree with what's been said.
I will then oppose as well.
Yeah, worry about the conditions.
I will also oppose.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Coombs?
I will also oppose.
Okay, let me just, okay. Councilmember Lawson?
Mayor, that was Coombs.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Councilmember Coombs, what's your position?
So I think that we have to recognize that if we take this approach that it doesn't seem all that historic, that what we're really saying is that all of the stages of the history of our city are not importantly historic, that only the very, very long past history is historically important. And then I think we run the risk of not recognizing the importance of the different stages of our city's development as historic, important, and meaningful. And I think that the commission and the staff have done a really good job of explaining how and what is historic about this particular building, this style of architecture, this point in our city's history and development. And so I just think, regardless of what folks are deciding right now, we really should be thinking carefully about what we determine as important for history, especially as we continue to grow and as, young people now are trying to understand our city and who we are and how we've grown.
Okay, I show Councilmember Savonic, Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Bergen, Councilmember Gardner, and myself in opposition. Is there further opposition?
Mayor Jurenski, I'm opposing.
May I ask a quick question, Mayor Sundberg?
Councilmember Sundberg, please proceed.
Can the building in a historical nature, can it be visited as like a museum? What's the inside going to look like?
Well, unfortunately, I only have so much information about the interior. That would be that has been voiced. The museum staff. I'm part of the museum and part of Library and Cultural Services. We showed interest in having a visitor center aspect to the building with its current use as Osner staff. I unfortunately I don't have information about whether that would be a possibility.
Okay. Is there further opposition? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Item number 3B will move forward. Item number 3C, Central Colorado Mountain River Basin Weather Modification Program. Staff presentation.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem. Good evening, council members. My name is Abu Ahmed. I'm a Water Resource Project Manager, Aurora Water here in Rocky Ford office. And I'm here today to present the cloud seeding cost share agreement proposal for your approval and move forward to regular session. CCMRB represents Central Colorado Mountain River Basin Water Weather Modification Program Cost Sharing Agreement. A little history of the cloud season. Drought is of significant concern in the Colorado River today. We're experiencing drought. And to remedy the effects of drought, Aurora Water started water conservation, water reuse, water storage. However, the only way to add water is through cloud seeding to produce more precipitation and snow where it is needed. From 1950s, Colorado had been conducting weather modification research. And since 1972, with the passing into law of the Weather Modification Act, the state program to permit weather modification has been in place. CWCB, which is Colorado Water Conservation Board, administers the weather modification program by issuing permits and regulations. Ground-based seeding with silver iodide. Cloud seeding is exactly what it sounded like. It's all a process where you send a minute amount of silver iodide from generators on the ground, and these silver iodide particles will eventually fertilize the clouds by acting as water molecules. The molecules in the cloud cling to the silver iodide and get heavier, producing snow. There are a couple of methods to this. First, the season usually starts from November 1st to April 15th. The last 2020-2021 season starts November to April. Traditionally, it was done from the air. However, to reduce costs and carbon footprint, we started using the generators. There are two types of generators, actually. We have the manual generators, and we have about 18 of those manual generators now that we are using. The manual generators use about 4% silver iodide. Then we have the remote generators on the right-hand side below. Those, we have two of them, and those use only 2% silver iodide. One of the advantages of using the remote is we have a minimal time lost and less silver iodide being used. In the 2020-2021 season, this cloud seeding program registered about 1,636 hours during the seeding season. The CCMRB program is planning on replacing the manual generators with remote generators for maximum efficiency. At the moment, there are 6 permitted programs here in Colorado. We are the number one, Central Colorado Mountain River Basins. The objective of the program. The main objective of this program is to increase snowfall in the season and overall snowfall for the entire winter season, and by that, to increase water supply. The 2020-2021 CCMRB crowd program activities produced an estimated 94,413 to 112,652 acre-feet of additional water in all the target area. And the target area consists of Pitkin, Eagle County, Summit County, and Grand counties. Now I have a breakdown for that, and that actually culminates the effectiveness of the program. When you look at the bottom of the blue shaded area, that is where our interest lies. For the effectiveness of the program, in the 2020-2021 season, the East Side Roaring Fork Basin above Basalt, which is an area of interest, Twin Lakes area, contributed 2,972 acre-feet of water. And in the same season, the Prime Fan River Basin above Rudai Dam contributed 5,684 acre-feet of water, which supplies Bosque Ivanhoe Reservoir. And then the Eagle River Basin above Edwards contributes 25,576 acre-feet of water. Cost share. The proposed agreement, these proposed agreements allow Aurora to share in the cost of cloud seeding services in the CCMRB program target area of the Upper Colorado River Basin in Pitkin, Eagle, Summit, and Grand counties. Aurora's cost share will be $9,600 of the $100,000 committed by the several different entities through this 2021-2022 CCMRB program cost share agreement. Colorado River District will coordinate funding and administer the program contract with the consultants. BCB will contribute $125,000 of this program. And that's all I have to present. I'll wait for questions.
Is there an action item here, or is this for information only?
Yes, there's an action item.
Very well. And so the question is to proceed with this particular plan. For discussion, yes. Questions to staff? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3C forward? Seeing no objection, item number 3C will move forward. Item number 3D, thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Item number 3D, Piney Lake Trail Water and Sewer Service Agreement.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. This is Sarah Young, Deputy Director in Aurora Water and Planning and Engineering. The agreement that you have before you is for service to approximately 138 homes up to a total of 180 homes in a service area in Douglas County that's outside the city. If I can actually have the ability to share, I'll just put a quick map. So I can orient folks with where we're talking about here. Okay, there we go. So this is actually in the southern part of the city, the southeastern part of the city, just south of the Blackstone development. It's this piece of property right here in Douglas County. So they're requesting water and sewer service from the city of Aurora. The total acreage of the entire site is 330 acres. However, of that, they're reserving 214 acres for open space. Some of the benefits associated with us providing water and sewer service to this property include that it would be we'd get dedicated the groundwater underneath the entire 330 acres. And the open space, that's 2/3 of it, as I mentioned, would be non-irrigated open space. So what that does is it ensures a low density, non-groundwater dependent community that's adjacent to Aurora. And it also, we are requiring within the agreement that the only turf that's allowed in the community is dedicated to active recreation spaces. So that's active parks as well as residential backyards. There's also the ability for us to have land dedicated to us to install water wells to be able to access the groundwater for drought protection in the future as needed. The requirement of the agreement would be that the developer would build all of the infrastructure. They would still be required to pay our connection fees and rates, both at 150% of the rates required within the city of Aurora. And we have verified the connections to the Blackstone community, and there are no issues presented to the infrastructure on the water or sewer side to provide that service. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions to staff? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3D forward? Seeing none, item number 3D will move forward. Item number 3E, Metropolitan District Model Service Plan updates.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. The item we're presenting tonight is an update to our Metro District Model Service Plan based on some prior feedback from City Council, specifically to add some clarity and transparency to our model prior to the 2022 service plans being pursued in January ahead of the spring 2022 new district election cycle. For some background for new council members, the first Metro districts were formed within the city during the 80s. In 1989, the city enacted what eventually became Chapter 122 of the City Code and adopted its first model service plan for Metro districts. In 2004, City Council significantly amended code to adopt guidance and requirements for metropolitan districts in the city of Aurora. The 2004 model service plan based on those requirements remains largely unchanged to this day. Recently, there's been much attention based on Metro districts, and we're aware that there were some questions that came up ahead of study session this evening. Several council members have inquired about additional education, transparency, and protection safeguards that the city may want to implement for Metro districts within the city. Staff has, in the last year, conducted outreach in town halls and sought feedback from various special district legal representatives, as well as compared our model to what other jurisdictions have in place. Management and Finance Committee in November, late November, suggested making some limited changes to our model for the time being. Part of that guidance was to leave the existing ARI language, noting that further updates may be necessary in the future, depending on the further analysis and debate on the recently proposed transportation fee. Based on City Council feedback and statutory changes, staff has therefore prepared the following outline of limited model service plan changes for council consideration. In the definition sections, there's a few changes, one of which being the agreed upon procedures engagement. This is a new definition necessary for the provision further below in the financial plan. Colorado revised statutes was added for clarity. There's some clarity around operations and maintenance mill levy. There is some provision around the website and the provision requiring districts to create and maintain a website for their community when applicable. Including this list is a requirement to post any and all information and documents required by state law, including any campaign funding information that is required by the Secretary of State for candidates running for district board. This is all really just to follow state law and some changes with the state statutes. In that financial plan section, agreed upon procedures examination, this is a new provision that has added language to encourage an examination of a district's past financial records at the time the district board transitions to a resident controlled board. The language is kept general to allow for the board to direct the examination based on the specific concerns and cost considerations of their district. There's some additional language clarifying the maximum mill levy in relation to the operations and maintenance. There's an annual report section that includes language to clarify information to be included in the annual report. And the biggest change is really in the disclosure and transparency sections. We added some clarity around disclosure to purchasers. Language was added to require the disclosure form used by the districts to conform to the city's standard model, Exhibit D in the document. That includes written notice to be provided to the city for the date of petition for organization, written notice of disclosure to initial purchasers, disclosure information to be displayed at sales offices, annual notice provided to all eligible electors, and meeting format flexibility and location requirements. This was really kind of in relation to what we experienced with the pandemic and the ability to do remote meetings. Additionally, there is Exhibit D, notice of special district disclosures. The notice form has been refined to add clarity for purchasers and consistency across districts. And just to inform council of what to expect in the next month or so and upcoming new district timelines, whether it's decided to move these changes forward or just stick with the existing model, I just wanted council to be aware that there's a spring election cycle in 2022. So new districts are going to need to submit their application materials to staff by early to mid-January to make the January M&F meeting. So we've got a bit of a tight turnaround. That's why we're kind of keeping these rather limited here to bring these to study. So we would need to follow in the new year to study session and public hearings in February. The new district service plans would need to be presented to council for public hearings no later than the end of February. And that's to meet the required deadlines before the May elections. It's a spring election cycle. Sometimes in the even years, there's a spring and a fall. So we have a kind of a tight timeline in the beginning of the year. So I just wanted to point that out to add some clarity on why we're pursuing these changes at the end of the year here, and want to make sure that we give the district reps working on those the appropriate model to use. So we're happy to answer any questions, and I've also got legal counsel from the attorney's office here to assist. Thank you.
Mayor?
Mayor?
Questions of staff?
Yes, Mayor.
Comments, Councilmember Combs.
Yeah, so it sounds like these are fairly specific to things that need to come up before the election. I guess my concern is that there are additional conversations that I think we really need to have about some potential changes to our model service plan around some of the issues that have come up recently with existing districts within the city of Aurora. And so I don't want to make it harder for people to do the work they need to do by mid-January, but are we going to have more opportunities to have a conversation about things like the percentage of the value of assessment, right? Because people are paying significant amounts of money above and beyond the taxes they would otherwise pay to metro districts in ways that are continuing to be shocking to folks. And then there also are questions and issues around what's referred to as model servant arrangements, which I know we do have some of the kind of coordinating or controlling metro districts operating within the city, which also reduces the resident control even once the districts that they reside in become resident controlled. They still have less control over issuance of debt and of taxation. And so are those things that we are going to have further opportunities to discuss? Sure. Should we be talking about them now, or can we kind of push those and do these now and those later?
Oh, certainly. Councilmember, just to respond to that question, we can certainly bring changes, whenever council would like. These were really, that's why we kind of kept these limited to really address some changes at the state law level, and then added some transparency and clarity, particularly on the disclosure form. So that was kind of the purpose here. But yeah, we could certainly bring further updates.
And if I could advise council that you will have basically two opportunities to amend this particular ordinance, and first and second reading.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, and I think this is important to provide disclosure for homeowners as well. I do have a question on, and I understand also the timeliness because of the spring election. That's going to be kind of a really close deadline to meet. But my question is on the notice that goes to the homeowners. How would that work when the Metro District is not the one selling the homes? So you have, builders that are selling the homes and have salespeople. How would that work?
And you're referring to Exhibit D, the notice of special district disclosure to home buyers?
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be actually at the closing table and also recorded.
Okay, what about the posting? That they have to do a posting on their sales door or something?
They do, that is correct. So there would be a disclosure information to be displayed in the sales offices, and then there's the annual notice provided to eligible electors and written notice of disclosure to initial purchasers as well. So there's several kind of.
Though? The sales office is responsible, the builder, or the Metro District?
The district is ultimately responsible, and so I would say also the builders.
Yeah, so I guess that's my question is how can the district do that? They're not selling the homes. They're the organization that sets up the Metro District. I mean, they're the Metro District. They're not selling the homes. They're not like literally having people selling homes.
That is correct. There are some responsibilities that fall to the Metro District and some that actually fall to the people making the transactions to make sure that this stuff is being communicated properly.
So if I'm just looking at it from a practicality perspective of how this actually will work. So if the Metro District, let's say they tell their builders that they have to post it in the sales office and the notices need to go, well, the district would do that. What if, I guess what I'm saying is, what if it doesn't happen? Who's responsible, the Metro District or the sales office? Because they don't direct the sales office.
Is my attorney on? Could I get some clarity on that question?
Yes, this is Brian Rulo at the City Attorney's Office. Mayor Pro Tem, the language in the service plan dictates that the district will use reasonable efforts to make these disclosures. The recent legislation, Senate Bill 262, puts the obligation for the disclosure that conforms with these edits. Under state law, it is the seller has complied. So the seller is the party as a part of that closing process that has to make that disclosure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 3E forward? Seeing no objection, item number 3E will move forward. Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
Item number 4A, consideration to approve the 2022 City Council meeting calendar. Staff presentation.
Yes, Mayor, this is Katie Rodriguez, the city clerk. In your backup documentation, you have the proposed 2022 City Council meeting calendar. This calendar was created and we took into consideration the deadlines for approving the budget, holidays that are recognized by the city, and other important meetings that council might attend during the year. Charter states there needs to be 2 council meetings a month. And once this is approved, council can only change the calendar by unanimous vote of council or by creating a special meeting in accordance with the council rules.
Questions of staff or and further discussion? Is there any objection to moving item number 4A, the council meeting calendar forward?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
You knew I would have an objection.
I was trying to move it kind of fast.
No, my only, and I do know that the Accelerate is confirmed to be in June, so I think that all worked out. The February winter workshop is not until, well, yeah, it's not until February 26th. I would propose that that gets moved up to January 29th.
Very well. Is there any objection to moving the winter workshop up to January 29th? Seeing none, the winter workshop will be moved to January 29th. I believe we have to still vote on this formally. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving the city council calendar forward as amended by the Mayor Pro Tem? Seeing no objection, item number 4A, the city council meeting calendar will move forward. Item number 4B.
Mayor, sorry.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Everybody knows to put this on their calendar. I think it's February 13th is the Super Bowl.
Oh, I'm sorry. Another one. Okay. I'm sorry. February 13th. I'm sorry. So what's your proposal?
Nothing.
Can we bring the calendar back up?
I'm just making that announcement. No, there's no change.
Oh, there's no, okay, very well. Okay. Item number 4A will move forward. Item number 4B, American Rescue Plan Act, spending recommendations.
Hello, this is Nancy Wishmeyer.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry. I would also like to propose that we delay this presentation until the winter workshop, which is why I wanted to move it up to January 29th versus going through it all today.
Okay. And if you could state the purpose, which I believe is to have adequate time to discuss it in a different forum.
Yes, I think for the winter workshop, one of the things that I would like to do is to have us discuss the continuing ARPA funds at that workshop, and it's a really good format to do so.
Very good. It is very well. Is there any objection to moving the discussion on ARPA funding to the winter workshop? Seeing none, then we will move item number 4B to the winter workshop. Item number 4C, Civil Service Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission vacancies. Katie?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I just wanted to provide an update on the upcoming vacancies for the Civil Service Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in your backup material, you have the upcoming vacancies for Civil Service Commission, February 14th, 2022. The chair, Jim Weeks, his term will be ending. Brooke Gabrielli, she resigned from the commission, so there's one current vacancy on civil service. The Planning and Zoning Commission, at the end of December, there will be two terms ending, one for the chair and one for Becky Hogan. Becky Hogan is seeking reappointment to the commission. And so this is to get direction from council as to how you would like to move forward with the application due dates, the rankings, interviews, and appointments. So pending approval of the 2022 council meeting calendar on December 20th, this is kind of a proposed schedule that we could go by to receive applications, have the rankings due by council members, have them reviewed at a council meeting, conduct the criminal background checks, and then I split the interviews into two different study sessions. One could be for planning and zoning, and one can be for Civil Service Commission. And then if you would like, we could do the appointments for both commissions during the beginning of February at a council meeting.
Is there discussion on the proposed schedule? Any questions? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving the proposed timeline forward? Seeing no objection, the proposed timeline will move forward. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Item number 5A, Comcast presentation regarding investment in the city of Aurora and programs available to Aurora residents.
Mayor, I brought this in this presentation for John Lehman, who is the Senior Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs. I wanted to bring this forward to just give information about what Comcast is investing in Aurora and also their RISE program. So it's for information only.
Oh, very well. Okay.
Mr. Lehman?
Mr. Lehman, please proceed.
Yeah, I can't seem to share my screen, and I will keep this very quick since I know we've gone a little bit longer. So you do have the presentation in your packet, and mainly I just want to share a few talking points, a few things that Comcast has done and is involved in the community of Aurora for the last 30 years, but really the last 10 years since I've been at Comcast. So on a yearly basis, our subscribers pay back to the city $3.5 million in what we call franchise fees, in addition to roughly $400,000 to $500,000 in PEG fees, public education and public education and government fees. So that's a give or take around $4 million. But what's really important in this conversation is what Comcast has done over the years in the community investment and the community impact space, and particularly since COVID has hit. So in the last 2 years, we've invested roughly $300,000 in Aurora Sister Cities, Aurora Public Schools Foundation, the Boys and Girls Club, a whole variety of different communities in Aurora to help Aurora citizens connect to the internet and really thrive in a state where it's uncertain and things are kind of unknown. And with that is our Internet Essentials program. So with Internet Essentials, it's broadband internet to low-income households. It is $9.95 a month, and we've connected more than 80,000 Aurora citizens to the internet in the last 10 years. What we've done since COVID hit is did a 2-month free promo. We've increased the speed of Internet Essentials. So the price has stayed the same, $9.95 a month, but the speed has gone from 5 megabits download to 15 to 25 to now at 100 for the same price. Over the 10 years, the price has not changed. In addition, we created lift zones. Because of the pandemic, as many of you know, schools, education was from home, work is from home. We've worked with the city of Aurora, with nonprofits in Aurora, to find locations where we could connect Wi-Fi so that individuals, families could come, connect for free, and either do their work, do Zoom meetings that we're on now, or apply to programs, whether that's applying for new jobs, applying for Social Security, etc. We have approximately 10 locations with the city of Aurora, some with the city, some with nonprofits, and they have been incredibly successful. And we are continuing to look at connecting more of those lift zones. And then finally, the RISE program that Councilwoman Lawson mentioned. This is a program where we have committed to doing grants to small businesses that are owned by people of color and minorities, and we are now adding all women. These small businesses, it's grants to do marketing, communications, and technology services so that these small businesses can figure out how to connect with those individuals, particularly in this environment where we may not be able to visit those businesses at the time. And so in Aurora, this is a nationwide, all of these are nationwide programs. In Aurora, we have more than 30 small businesses that have been granted these grants. It's anywhere from, $1,000 up to $10,000 that they've received. I have a whole list of them. I can send that to you all another time, but I just wanted to share that with you all, that it is incredibly important for Comcast. We are part of this community. We have approximately 10,000 individuals who work for Comcast in Colorado. Many are based in Aurora, either live in Aurora or work in Aurora. And I just wanted to share the commitment we have to the city of Aurora. And again, our partnerships with Aurora Sister Cities, with Aurora Public Schools Foundation, et cetera. So with that, I know we're getting late in the evening, happy to take questions, but I just appreciate the time to share a little bit about how we are committed to be a community member with you all in the city of Aurora.
Questions for Mr. Lehman?
Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
So over the course of certainly 2021 and the pandemic in general, I have had a number of constituents express serious concern about outages. So, you know, everything that you presented sounds great, but there are a lot of concerns from folks about whether or not they're going to be able to rely on their Comcast service to be able to do their jobs, especially when they're having to increasingly do their jobs remotely due to the pandemic. So what kinds of work are you all doing to ensure reliability and consistency of service and quick responses when folks are experiencing outages so they don't have, you know, 1 to 2 full work days that they're losing in any given instance due to outages?
Absolutely. So we've invested more than $1.3 billion in our technology and network. We upgrade our system, so we double our capacity every 2.5 years. What's very important to me, and my information is on the presentation, and you can share that with anyone, is if you hear of an outage, if you hear of an unreliable service, please let me know, because we will look into it and try to take care of it and fix it. So our whole goal is to connect our community, and we truly focus on that. And we know that life happens, that things happen. Sometimes it's another contractor that cuts a line. Sometimes it's a squirrel that bites through the line. I mean, there are a variety of things that happen. A lot of times it's also where an individual's modem is placed. If it's placed next to their microwave, or sometimes in a like near or wrapped in like in a closet that is sort of cement surrounding, they don't get the same Wi-Fi service that they would if their modem was placed in a different place in their house. So I say that meaning, yes, reliability is incredibly important. And it's what's really important to me is knowing about when and where these things occur so that we can look into it, get our techs out there and fix the problem. We're not going to be perfect at all. Our system, you know, we've been upgrading our system constantly, but we've also, you know, been serving customers in Aurora for 30 plus years. So we will always take a look at whenever anybody hears an issue, please reach out to me. We'll do our best to look into it and see what's going on. A lot of times it's more complicated than just the simple Comcast isn't serving me. It can be a whole variety of complications. So appreciate the question, and please send my information to others out there, to citizens, and we'll do our best to fix it as fast as possible.
Further questions or comments?
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or comments, this was for information only. Thank you very much, Mr. Lehman. Item number 5B, support to create a business safety and security update grant program. Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor. Just provide a little bit of background and description of what I'm looking to do here. So I met with the Colorado Retail Council about a month and a half ago, met with a couple of other groups, and I think we've all probably seen the news stories about the growing issue of retail theft, not just here in Aurora, but across the country, and certainly Aurora has not been immune to it. And so what I'm proposing to do here is to set aside $3 million of our available ARPA money to create a grant program for businesses to make security upgrades. And kind of what that'll look like, just want to briefly describe it for the benefit of the public that's watching and hasn't necessarily read the item to ensure or so people know that there is some accountability in what that'll look like. So our police department currently does environmental design reviews where they can go out to businesses, residences, and make recommendations for security upgrades, things like lighting, alarm systems, cameras, fencing. There's a whole variety of things that can be recommended. And so for a business to participate in this program, they would need to go through that process. They would receive a document back from the police department that would say what the recommended security upgrades are. And then once they had that, they could apply to participate in the grant program. If they selected one of the items or some of the items that are whatever the cost fell down on that list. So this would dedicate up to $10,000 per business. Obviously, some businesses wouldn't need that much to create all their upgrades. Some would need much more. And so this, for the ones that would need much more, they could decide what they wanted to do. They would get approval from city staff before making that change. And then they would be reimbursed after the project was completed. I did set aside $500,000. I'm proposing setting aside $500,000 specifically for the East Colfax corridor from Yosemite to Peoria. That area, for those who aren't aware, has seen a very significant increase in retail theft. It's specifically at the intersection of Colfax and Havana, the Walgreens, the Walmart, the marijuana dispensary, and other businesses along that corridor. In addition, the city of Denver is working on a similar program on their side of East Colfax. And because we all know crime doesn't stop at borders, I want to make sure that we're focusing on an area that's seen as such a big increase in crime to not make it more of an attractive target. So that's kind of a really brief description of what I'm looking to do here. And then I guess, I don't know if the city attorney wants to say anything. Otherwise, I can answer questions or if anyone has questions for staff, of course.
Mayor, this is Tim Joyce with the City Attorney's Office. And Councilmember Gardner has summarized it well. The ARPA funds, there must be a clear connection between the pandemic and the use of the funds. So the funds can be used for something like changing the physical layout of the establishment to enable social distancing or to set up barriers or partitions or to enhance the cleaning efforts. If a business can show that they've experienced violence directly related to the pandemic, they can create a plan to help mitigate the violence they experience. So there are some parameters on how the funds can be used. They have to be directly related to the pandemic.
Well, I mean, I'm sympathetic to this, particularly for small business. I don't know about large retailers, but I don't understand that. I don't see the nexus.
That's what a business has to come up with, though. Yes. To get the funds.
So Mayor, if I could.
Councilmember Gardner.
So at least from my perspective, over the last 18 to 20 months, Aurora has seen a significant increase in crime. And in many cases, that has been blamed on the result of government response to COVID, whether that's not having proactive policing to maintain social distancing, whether that's changing sentencing guidelines to keep our jail populations low, and things like that. And so we've seen a significant increase in crime due to our response to COVID. And so I think there is a nexus there.
Mayor?
Further discussion.
Yes, Mayor Birkin?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Maybe this is for Councilmember Gardner, because I think this is a really good idea. Obviously, the businesses do have a lot of needs for security. And I think this would be a good way to assist them. This was done in Denver, you mentioned. So were they using ARPA funds as well? Do you know?
Correct. They created a $4 million grant program using ARPA funds.
Okay, so they were able to get that nexus approved.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Did they, Councilmember Gardner, is there any limitation in terms of, for instance, the size of the retailer? I mean, if you have so national retailers would be eligible for stores in Aurora, or is it limited to by a certain size of the business?
So at least how I have it written, there's not a limitation. I'm certainly open to feedback or discussion from, mayor and council if they feel like we should put a limitation. I guess my thought process from that point of view was deterrence and having a safer community, no matter the size of the retailer, will help everyone, but certainly understand that, you know, a large national retailer has, you know, budgets in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for security upgrades, and some of the small retailers have none. And so certainly open to, you know, if there's any thoughts or opinions on putting some kind of limit in there.
Well, I just don't think 3 million. If there's no limitation in terms of the size, and you have sophisticated large retailers, and I met with Walgreens last week to talk about organized retail theft in their stores. You know, but the large retailers do have resources that the smaller ones don't, and 3 million, and a larger, more sophisticated retailer could absorb $3 million. A lot of that money in their stores in Aurora in one application. What is the limitation on the grant again?
It's $10,000 per
Okay, so that's not much. Okay. Further discussion, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so the limit is 10,000. So
yeah,
right, and they have to qualify. They have to qualify, and then they would only get reimbursed after they show proof that they implemented what the environmental review board or whatever
that's correct
recommended. Okay, and then my only other question is, if let's say we do this program and we don't use the whole 3 million, then where does that money go?
I think it would remain in our available pot of ARPA dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
So is the intent to have this be a part of that ARPA discussion we're having at the winter workshop?
No, my intent is for council to vote on it tonight. I think it's a pressing issue. I think it sounds like the mayor has met with similar people that I have and others. And I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've all seen about the significant increase in retail theft. And I think it's something that we need to address now. So my proposal is to have council vote on it tonight.
I think we delayed discussing cold weather activation funds for homelessness, which is certainly imminently urgent because cold weather is here. So I would move that we have this conversation along with the rest of the ARPA conversation so that we're having a really clear balancing of what are all of the priorities. Because I think having this in isolation, then we don't get to look at what is everything else that's being asked of us. So I would move to have this conversation along with the rest of the ARPA funds conversation so we can properly weigh.
Let me ask a quick question, then I'm going to go back to Councilmember Coombs, and I'll take that as a motion. And so, Councilmember Gardner, how did you arrive at $10,000? Did you price certain equipment or technology to arrive at that number in terms of the efficacy of those dollars?
Yeah, so, I've seen some of these environmental design review documents before and some of the recommended things that are on there. And so just kind of did some, not scientific research into what some of these things would cost, and then kind of tried to keep the amount low enough to where it was sizable enough, especially for a small business, but small enough that it would allow us to serve more businesses across the whole city.
Okay. Councilmember Coombs has asked that the decision be moved to the winter workshop. Is there any objection? I'll object. Is there any further objection? Gardner?
I object. Zvonek.
I object. Okay. Are we voting on the delay?
On delaying until the winter workshop.
Oh, I object.
You object? Okay.
I object. Sunberg.
I'm sorry. Okay. I've got Councilmember Gardner, Councilmember Zvonek, the Mayor Pro Tem, and Councilmember Sunberg. Is there a further objection? Then it will, seeing that 6 have not arisen, it will be moved into the winter workshop.
I think hear me. I objected.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay. Then the motion failed. back to Councilmember Gardner.
I don't have any additional comments.
Well, I think you want to move it forward. Is there any objection to moving it forward?
Mayor.
Just, I'm sorry.
I
I'm
object.
sorry, Councilmember Coombs. Okay. Is those who voted in opposition to move it to the winter workshop are those same individuals in favor of moving it forward at this time?
Yes.
Okay, very well. Okay, it will move forward. Item number 5C, proposal for the creation of a red tape reduction ad hoc committee. Councilmember Zvonek.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So the purpose of the red tape reduction committee would be to work with any industries, businesses, nonprofits that operate in the city that comply with rules or regulations that are subject to city fees or subject to any sort of approval process throughout the city. The goal would be to form this committee and in the first several months of next year to hold a series of hearings where we would invite these nonprofits, business, and anybody from industry across the city to come in and to present to us those rules, regulations, or fees that they comply with in Aurora that they might not in other municipalities, or maybe that they comply with here that are just simply more onerous than they are in other municipalities. And at the end of the work that we would do as a committee, we would work with staff to put forward a plan to move forward with either ordinances, new policies within the departments to say that these are the rules, regulations, or fees that we're going to get rid of in order to make Aurora more open for business and easier to operate in, even for nonprofits. It's a challenge that I heard a lot about over the course of the last year. And I think that creating this committee and having an intentional focus on it would give us an opportunity to really clean up some of the red tape that we have in the city.
Questions or comments on the Zvonek proposal?
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to say I fully support this. I mean, I think all of us have heard from businesses, you know, during the pandemic and even before and after the pandemic about just some of the red tape and regulations that interfere with their ability to, you know, move quickly through the process to open businesses and so forth. So I think it's a good idea.
Further discussion.
Mayor?
Councilmember Lawson.
Councilmember Zvonek, I just had a couple questions. I mean, I've been hearing about the red tape with businesses for a long time. I just had a question about the organizational piece, your thoughts on this. So essentially, you're going to get a set number of council members, and then how are these hearings going to work, these public hearings? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so my thought was, once we have the committee set, and in the recommendation, I left that up to the Mayor Pro Tem to determine the size of the committee and then the membership, just as she would for the other committees. And going forward, the vision that I have initially, but I think would want to sort this out with whoever ultimately serves on this committee, would be to set a set number of hearings, say February, one each month, February, March, April, and maybe into May and June, hopefully not that many because I'd like to get things done, and invite and do it through as many avenues possible. So the chambers, the business associations, tax and licensing, any which way we can reach businesses. I really want to reach some of those small businesses that might not be a part of the chamber, or might not be a part of the business districts, in order to get input from them, but also nonprofits. Going back to the article I mentioned earlier in the youth violence prevention program, the article, there was nonprofits that could potentially be great partners with the city that talked about the excessive red tape that they dealt with. And so I want to hear from them too. So the goal would be, again, to reach out to them to say, these are the hearings that we're going to host over these 4 months, and invite them in. The one other piece I would like to have is some way to provide anonymous feedback, because I know that there might be city processes that maybe organizations or businesses or industries comply with, that they're concerned that if they voice it, there could be retribution. I don't believe that could happen, but I could see that being a fear. And so I'd like to have a way for anonymous feedback to come in. But again, make a public announcement that these are the dates of the hearings, hold those hearings, and then at the back end of it, meet with staff. And the reason why I think it'll be important for us to meet with staff is there may be a fee that we have in Aurora that we don't have in another municipality, but maybe it's because that fee funds an FTE that doesn't come out of the general fund, and so there's a reason for it. So I think it's important that we sit down say these are what we heard from business, industry, and nonprofits. Now, what should be our path forward? Should we eliminate it? Should we reform it? Or should we leave it as is because it's necessary and knowing why? But then ultimately come forward with recommendations of, like I said, whether it's ordinances or just resolutions saying this is how we're going to address the red tape.
Okay, Mayor, can I just do a follow-up? So basically, you're not talking about like how planning and commission, our planning department, they do the hearings. This is kind of more not so formal. It's without, where we need an attorney. We're kind of looking, these are just kind of public kind of ways that people can get civic engagement and talk about this issue. Okay, public.
Yeah, and I would want to work, once we have the committee set, I would want to work with staff to make sure that requisite staff sits in on those hearings. But ultimately, it's really just a lot of information, give and take between the members of the committee, staff, and then those who come to present, and then moving forward with recommendations on how we're going to address the challenges that we were brought to us.
Further discussion, Councilmember Coons.
So I guess my question is, why is this specifically focused on organizations? I think a lot of individuals deal with red tape and bureaucracy that catastrophically affects their lives to the point that they become homeless, become more ill, and have just really negative impacts. So my question is, why are we only focusing on the entities that often are much more able to absorb the costs of bureaucracy rather than also looking at people, individuals, human beings, and human lives that are often dramatically more impacted by bureaucracies and red tape?
Yeah, look, I think that as I say in this, the purpose is to make Aurora more business friendly, and so it's really focused on nonprofits and the organizations that we could potentially partner with, businesses and industry. I guess individuals, we could have a separate conversation about how individuals comply with red tape, but I think it's more often that it's going to be business and organizations, nonprofits that deal with it than specific individuals, unless they're trying to, of course, start their own business.
I mean, I think I'll have to disagree with you that individuals don't deal with this every day, but thank you for answering.
Further discussion.
Yes, I'd like to chime in.
Councilmember Medina.
Yes, regarding some of the issues around nonprofits and working with the city, a lot of that is just around relationships that you build. I mean, I think I can attest to that personally, in that working for the city prior, it's about the relationships and the city's willingness to work with those entities. That's basically what it is. I don't think it's more meetings, more steps, because I think this is another step of red tape itself. We're excluding certain groups because we don't want to have a relationship with certain people. And I think it's about the relationship. If we have a relationship with the community we serve, and those members and those entities and those businesses already, that we shouldn't have any issues with those things.
Mayor?
Mayor Protem.
Yeah, this is, it is a business red tape. I know that Councilmember Zvonek is including nonprofits that may have to go through certain steps or regulations. So it's not just about relationships. Of course, we have relationships, but you have to still apply for a business license. You still have to pay permit fees. You still have to follow certain codes and rules. And what we're trying to get at is what obstacles are in the way or maybe are delaying you. It doesn't mean we're going to get rid of, all regulations or rules. I think it's just to be able to hear from them, because we have heard, and I have heard since I've been on council for 6 years about certain processes taking too long, costing too much. And so I think it's a really good proposal to understand that side of the fence and then find out if there's room to make improvement.
And I just want to say, as the mayor, as a former small business owner, I certainly support this proposal, and this is about, in a way, I think, helping to create jobs and economic opportunities in our city. Councilmember Zvonek.
Yeah, I want to address Councilmember Medina. Your point is well taken about nonprofits, and if they don't currently have any challenges, red tape that they comply with other than relational, then they wouldn't have any need to come and present at the committee. But if they do, and again, this is for what I've heard from some nonprofits is that there are some bureaucratic process that they have to deal with. I would like to hear that. I think that would be the purpose of it. But again, they're not forced to do this. Nobody has to come and present before the red tape reduction committee. It would just be a way for us to learn what is out there that is preventing Aurora from being more job friendly and more open to nonprofits that could potentially help us in so many other areas.
Further discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So having worked with planning departments all across the country in the AEC industry, I'm sure that there are things that we do that we could probably do better. Every, different jurisdiction seems to have different quirks. So I definitely see the merit of what this committee is trying to accomplish, but I really do want to emphasize what Councilmember Medina and what Councilmember Coombs both said, that we need to also look at the bureaucracy as it pertains to our individual residents. I deal with a lot of residents who I have to personally get involved with through council requests to help them cut through some of the bureaucracy or to get attention, onto the issues that they're bringing forward to us. So I would like to see us, if you could maybe consider a friendly amendment to your proposal, also include individual red tape. And maybe we can phase this so you can deal with the nonprofits and the businesses, address those issues through resolution, ordinance, whatever we need to do, and then tackle the individual things as well. I'm all for finding efficiencies in how we operate, but I want to make sure that we are also advocating for folks who frankly don't have the institution of a business or nonprofit to already advocate for them, or even the connections and the savvy, that might come from being connected with folks in the business industry, from already having relationships with staff, as Councilmember Medina mentioned, and also, having legal expertise at their disposal as well.
Councilmember Marcano, I appreciate that perspective. I think my feeling is that for our residents that they do have advocates, and it's the 10 of us on council, and if we want to cut through the red tape, if individual residents have challenges with the cities, which I understand that they do, they have the ability to reach out to their ward members or any one of us on council. And so I would hope that we're their advocates. But again, there are some things that our city puts in place, whether it's regulations, fees, rules that are costing time and money for businesses, which is making it harder to bring more jobs and opportunity to our city. And that's the purpose of this committee.
Further discussion. Councilmember Coombs.
But businesses also reach out to us to advocate on their behalf in that same way, as well as nonprofits. So if we're saying that council is enough of an advocate and enough of a solution to red tape for individuals, I'm not sure why that's not also true for us of businesses, because I know that I have been successful in making the connections with staff that are necessary to help businesses and nonprofits as well, not only individuals. So I feel like if we're going to say this applies, then we need to apply it across the board.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember Jurenski. I'm learning voices here.
Yeah, I'm here. I just want to address that. I mean, I hear that we're talking about red tape for individuals. I mean, I guess I would like some of those examples. I don't know if we're talking about red tape or we're talking about maybe broken laws, but what we're talking about here with this committee is supporting small businesses and things like maybe, for instance, the occupational privilege tax that is in Aurora that affects every business in Aurora, regardless of size. It also affects every worker. Every single worker in Aurora has the same tax put on them. So just some things like that is what we're talking about, and why we are focusing this on businesses. Also too, like licensing processes. Anybody who does business across cities, there was a huge I can attest to it on how we were able to apply for our outdoor licenses when businesses were shut down in Aurora to get that those outdoor seating permits. Aurora's lacking. So that's of this.
Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So a couple of the examples that come to mind are folks who have had their paperwork lost in the shuffle when applying for rental assistance, folks who have been, they feel, brushed off by APD when asking for incident reports when they were assaulted at one of the council members on this call's restaurant, quite frankly. So it is stuff like that that we need to see how we can improve those processes, not just for our businesses, but also for our residents as well.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving item number 5C forward? Is there objection? Seeing none, item number 5C will move forward. Seeing no other business before the council, thank you, everybody. Tonight, meeting is adjourned.
Y'all have a good night.